So, you're getting ready for your 40th birthday and you find this bald patch. Like, what were you thinking?
Kind of fear. I literally found my first bald patch while I was getting ready for my 40th birthday party. And that was in the October, and by Christmas, I had pretty much no hair left at all. One of the most common things that people said to me was along the lines of, but at least you've got a beautiful face. Why are they saying that? And I was very, very angry. And seeing women who looked a bit like me in some way meant that I didn't feel so kind of other.
If Lizzie can do it, I can do it too.
If they see kind of me showing up kind of imperfectly perfect, then I can show you how to have the confidence to do that as well.
Lizzie, welcome to the Inspired By Show.
Thank you so much for having me.
Well, thank you so much for coming here. And just for a bit of context for anyone watching and listening, we've been having these talks about having you on and having a catch up for a while now, typically originally off camera. And now our big coffee catch up, we've rescheduled to on camera.
Exactly.
So thank you for coming here. Now, Lizzie, obviously you're known as a confidence coach, and I would love to start with talking about confidence. Is confidence something that we are born with, or is it something that we can learn?
I think it's definitely something we can learn. And my view on confidence is actually, I suppose, quite different from the way a lot of people think about it, because I really, really believe there's no such thing as a confident person anyway, no matter how much work we do in ourselves or how hard we work to learn confidence, because we've all got things we're confident doing, or confident places we're confident being, people who make us feel confident, and then things and people and places that make us feel the opposite. And so I don't think it works for us to go out on a mission to be confident, though I think that what we can do is learn to be confident in specific areas or doing specific things. And that's kind of what I'm all about, and the belief that I subscribe to.
Interesting. And so is it something that we are confident all the time, or if we're a confident person, if I'm a confident person, does that mean that I'm confident all the time, or is there times where I might be not confident?
Yeah, definitely there's times that we're not confident, because I think there's a whole set of circumstances that have to be right for us to be feeling confident at any given moment. And so, one of the examples I give a lot is that I'm generally confident kind of as a speaker or on stage or in front of an audience where lots of people aren't. And I would probably be at my lowest level of confidence if you sent me into an expensive gym full of gorgeous fit people and told me to get on with doing a workout. But that doesn't mean that every single stage and every single audience ever will be ones that inspire confidence in me. So even though that is kind of where I feel good about myself and feel, yeah, I've got this, that's not to say it's across the board. So yeah, there's always going to be times where it's not there, even when we're in a situation that we feel confident in generally.
And were you born as someone naturally quite confident, or would you say that you've learned to be confident throughout your life and experiences?
Definitely wasn't born. I think if anything, I was born as somebody who was exceptionally shy and scared of everyone. I have really vivid memories of being very, very small and literally hiding behind my mum's legs whenever I was with someone we didn't know or an adult who wasn't so familiar, and just feeling kind of scared of everyone. Kind of bigger kids scared me. Like everyone just felt a bit scary is the best word to say, I think. So it kind of came gradually, but I think as I probably got sort of towards secondary school age, I started to feel a bit differently and feel a bit more, I guess I was more outgoing, whether or not there was an underlying confidence there or not, whether it was just more that I'd learned to present this kind of persona that kind of seemed more confident is probably more the case. I think the true confidence came a lot later.
Yeah. Where did that true confidence really come from?
To be honest, the real turning point for me in terms of my confidence was not that long ago. It was when I lost my hair to alopecia, which was only in 2017 when I turned 40. And I know that might sound really strange, because that's the kind of thing that would make most people's confidence kind of fall through the floor. And it did initially. Like, don't get me wrong, for the first few months, it was my confidence took about as big a knock as you can imagine. But that was the catalyst for me to start really thinking about how I was showing up in the world and what actually am I so frightened of and who am I really? And that was where that confidence really began.
Wow. And so tell me what was going on there. So you've just turned 40, and then what happened which made you start losing your hair and to where you are now?
Um, I don't know what made my hair fall out kind of when it did. My dad's got alopecia. My dad's completely bald. He lost his hair in his early 20s. And I know there can be a kind of hereditary factor there. And doctors all kind of say stress, but I think that's sort of a catch-all for meaning I haven't got a clue. And there'd been a lot that went on that year. I had finished my postgraduate diploma in coaching and started a coaching business and got married and turned 40, and then all my hair fell out. So it was a lot. It was a lot happened. But that's not to say it was like the most stressful year of my life. I've been through a lot bigger stresses than that. So I'm not sure what caused it. But it was a real shock to kind of, I literally found my first bald patch while I was getting ready for my 40th birthday party. And that was in the October, and by Christmas, I had pretty much no hair left at all. So it was all really, really sudden.
Wow. And what was going through your mind then? So, you're getting ready for your 40th birthday and you find this bald patch. Like, what were you thinking?
It was, I suppose probably the biggest feeling at that moment was kind of fear. Just that sense of, I don't know what this is. I don't know what's happening. There was the real immediacy of it. I'm about to go out with my girlfriends for my birthday and look, there's a bald patch. What the hell do I do? So it was, I think I went into that, I've got to get through this evening. And I know I kind of did it by putting my hair in a ponytail so I could kind of brush the front bit back over where the bald patch was. But then it was coming out so quickly after that. It was just terrifying because it felt so out of control. And I think for most of us, when we're low in confidence or when we're feeling scared, it's because we're in a situation that is just happening to us without us having any kind of control over it or any ability to kind of influence what's going on. And we just got to sit there as a passenger in this ride and wait and see where it takes you. So I had no idea where it was going to stop and if it was going to stop falling out and if it was going to grow back. And that sense of being in free fall and the absolute fear of I have no idea what's happening to me right now and what is about to happen to me. It was really, really scary.
Now, I just wanted to quickly interrupt this episode to share a quick message with you. Now, I've been hosting these interviews with Inspired by Show for a while now, and I've been loving all of the great feedback from our listeners. And it really means a lot when you all share from listening to these episodes, watching these episodes, share your incredible feedback. And I love that you love it as much as we do. Now, my mission for the Inspired by Show is to inspire others to challenge the norm, share their story, knowing that it's okay to be vulnerable and, shock horror, take the mask off and be raw and real. So I have a favour to ask. Can you help me on this mission by sharing this episode with someone who you think needs to hear this message? Maybe there's a friend, a loved one, a colleague, or someone that you know that would really benefit from hearing this inspiring story. If you could do that to help us, help even more people to challenge the norm and push themselves out of their own comfort zone, then I'd really appreciate it. So if you haven't already, share this episode with a friend, a loved one, a colleague, or someone that you know would benefit. Now, back to the episode. And so fast as well, right? And this probably wasn't the top priority, but I'm just thinking, it's Christmas, like you said, almost all your hair had gone at that point. What were people around you saying? Like, were they asking questions? How were they around you?
I'm really, really thankful that my hair fell out in winter because it meant that every time I left the house, I could put a hat on and nobody questioned it. And so outside the house, the big thing for me in those days, my kids were in primary school. So it was kind of the school pickup, the playground, the other mums, the gossiping. That was probably one of the most immediate fears for me. So I'd put the hat on and not tell anyone. And really the only people at first who were allowed to kind of see my head and what was happening on it were my husband and kids. But gradually I couldn't hide it. And my lovely Nana bought me a really good quality wig that I went and found one that was the closest I could find to my natural hair. But it was still pretty obvious that it wasn't my hair. And I guess one of the big turning points for me was this realization that the fear for me was coming from two different things. One was that my hair was falling out and I couldn't stop it. And one was the fear that people would realise my hair was falling out and realise I was wearing a wig. And that one, I saw I could do something about it by revealing it for myself, by telling the world, this is what's happening to me. And then I didn't have to be scared that someone would notice it was a wig because I'd already said it was. So I did it by and taking a bald selfie and sharing it on Facebook. And that was kind of how I came out to the world as a bald girl, which was one of the scariest things I've ever done.
Oh my God, I'm just thinking the exact same thing. Like, that is another level of just, you know, people say fight, flight and freeze. You know, you either hide from it or you rise to it. And I couldn't imagine a better way of rising to it.
Yeah, I mean, it was, even though it was a terrifying thing, and I look back now and realise it was a brave thing to do, it also felt like just an act of survival. It was the quickest and easiest way to remove the fear that people would realise that I was wearing a wig. So it was like, right, if I just do this, rip the plaster off, show them what I actually look like, and then that fear, it's just gone. There's no, there's no working my way through it. It's just gone. So it felt logically like a really simple solution. Didn't feel simple as my fingers hovering over the post button.
Wow. And what was the reaction? What were you like? Were you sort of like, put the phone away and I'll look at it in an hour and deal with whatever comes back? Or were you sort of like waiting for the comments to come in?
Funny enough, this is kind of one of the stories that I talk about when I'm sort of coaching about how we can bring ourselves confidence by kind of thinking about what are these things we can do, but also what can we do to kind of minimise how scary something feels. And so one of the things I did there was to tell a couple of really close friends beforehand, I'm about to do this, I'm terrified, please can you be ready to like just comment or something, so it's not just out there in cyberspace. So I'd set that up already. So very quickly, there were friends clearly saying lovely things about loving me and me being beautiful and all of those things. But it probably won't surprise you to know that everyone else very quickly jumped on with just so much love and support and kindness. And I think it's interesting because at that time I still hadn't really made peace with how I looked and what was going on for me. There wasn't much that anyone could say to me that was what I needed to hear. So all of the well-meaning comments, and I look back now and see how lovely they were, pretty much all of them pissed me off. So even though it was like, oh great, this is really nice, everyone's being nice, like, why are they saying that? I was really annoyed.
Yeah. Do you know what, that was actually something that was going through my mind just as you said that, because for me, I often feel like, yes, sometimes it's nice to get love, like whether it's like going through something as significant to your life as that, whether it's, going through, for me, it was when I had severe clinical depression and I started getting back into the world and everyone was so loving and kind, but it was like, I didn't really care. Like, it was like they weren't being absorbed by me. And I was kind of curious to see how and when you actually started to feel that love, or was it like you shared there where you're like, okay, thanks, but really deep down, I'm still not quite ready for this.
Yeah, I mean, I think that probably one of the most common things that people said to me was either telling me that I look great, or quite a common one was along the lines of, but at least you've got a beautiful face. And it was meant really, really kindly. And I knew even then when it was winding me up that it was meant kindly. But it made me, like, I was saying to them at home, I'd say, oh, what? So if I was ugly, then it would be bad that my hair had fallen out? Like, why are they saying that? And I was very, very angry. And I think for me now, I can see that it was more underpinned by me just absolutely not recognising that or feeling beautiful in any way. So it almost felt patronising and like it wasn't genuine, that they were just kind of saying it because I thought that was the right thing to say, rather than me allowing myself to actually believe that that's what anyone thought.
Yeah. When did you start to acknowledge and receive and actually process that emotion and those experiences yourself?
I think it was a turning point I had where I was crying in bed one night about my hair situation, and that was quite normal in those days. And having a moment where I suddenly thought, what am I actually crying about? Am I crying because my hair's fallen out? Am I crying because of something else? And I realised that actually what was going on for me was that I had, just like pretty much every woman I know, spent like decades trying to make myself look like a certain image of a woman, because that's what we're told, and that image changes slightly from culture to culture and generation to generation, but it's basically there. We can all picture her and know what we're supposed to want to look like. And we invest all this time and money and energy into trying to look like this woman that we're never going to look like, because she's not even real. And I think what I realised was that I was crying because I realised it had all been for nothing. It had been such a waste, and that I was never going to achieve it now, no matter how much money I spent or diets I went on. I'm now never going to look like that woman. But then the next thought that came was that meant that I could give myself permission to just stop with it, stop all of that, and give myself a break from it. And it was so liberating to be able to say, well, you're never going to do it. So just like, just stop. It's exhausting. It's exhausting and you're never going to achieve it. Why are you pushing yourself down this kind of futile road? And then the next morning, I had a proper look in the mirror for the first time since I'd lost my hair. And by a proper look, I don't mean I've been avoiding mirrors, because, I've been doing my makeup and everything else, but not really just stopping and looking and thinking, what do I actually think about what I'm seeing? And I realised all those comments on Facebook had been right. I did look beautiful, and having no hair did suit me. And I thought, actually, I think maybe I look better with no hair. And I realised that actually I'd been crying about having no hair because that's what you're supposed to do. Women are supposed to be devastated about their hair falling out. And I hadn't stopped to say to myself, but am I? What do I really think about this? So that for me really was the turning point, where I really was able to question all of those beliefs that I'd bought into, that we all buy into, and actually see them for what they were. It was a bit like kind of one of those sorts of, seeing the Matrix kind of moments of like, hang on, I think I can see what's going on here, and I'm choosing not to be part of it anymore.
Wow. I love that liberation feeling, right? Like I could feel it as you were describing it, because there's so much that society puts on us. And to be fair, we put on us as well by what we read, what we see, what we listen to. Did you at any point then change what you were reading, watching, listening to, so that you didn't fall back into that sort of comparisonitis, as I would call it?
To a certain degree. I think, unfortunately, the society that we live in makes it really, really hard to avoid it. But what I did realise was kind of when I joined like a Facebook group for people who have alopecia, and other women were sharing their photos, the more I saw bald women, the more kind of normalised it felt for me, the more I felt normal. And, I know people talk a lot about the importance of representation and why it matters so much for all sorts of different reasons. But for me, that was it, that kind of seeing women who looked a bit like me in some way meant that I didn't feel so kind of other. And actually, there are people who look like me, and that's a good thing. I think probably the biggest space where I tried to kind of change what I was consuming was on social media, probably especially kind of Instagram, I guess, where I actively started to follow accounts of like bald women and fat women and the kinds of people that I wanted to see, because they reinforce that there are women out there who look the way I do. And of course, we know, right, social media, the algorithms are very clever, and it learns quite quickly what you want to see, and then it shows you more of that. So it's quite easy to change your feed and to change what you're seeing once you make a decision like, no, these are the accounts I'm going to follow. So that was probably the biggest change I made.
Yeah, and it's such a great way of putting it, because we can choose what we see. Like you say, if we're researching and searching for beautiful women with hair and skinny and all this sort of stuff, and then we're annoyed that we're seeing that, well, that's what you're also looking for, you know. So you've got to work in your favor. I always find it fascinating the impact of public figures in situations like this. So I remember when I first came out of having the severe clinical depression I had and being so unwell and the suicidal tendencies and everything, when I started to research other people that had been through it, it was almost like, wow, I maybe don't have as big a brand or a voice, but I can have an impact like them. And I've seen a lot of women who have alopecia do the same thing. You know, Jada Pinkett Smith, massive advocate for it. Olivia Bentley, like there's a lot of people now that are sort of really paving the path for that. How influential do you think they are in changing people's views and making it a bit more of an awareness?
I think it can be mixed. I think when you're so in the public eye, there can be real pressure to be inspirational with the stuff you're going through. And I feel like sometimes for kind of, I guess, real people like me, it can feel a bit jarring. And even when as celebrities might talk about why they're finding something hard, I think it can still be framed in a way where they feel like they have to present it in this kind of neatly packaged sort of story. And then open themselves up to the comments, whether, you know, I'm not even talking about trolls, I'm talking about people in the comments who say, but you're so inspirational and I love your story, and actually not everybody wants to hold themselves up to be that person. So whilst in a way I think it's really important and for kind of big names and celebrities to be sharing the difficult stuff, I think it can be a bit of a double-edged sword for those of us who are going through something similar, because we don't have this kind of massive following of supporters or the financial resources to go and buy the most perfect human hair wigs and get your photo shoots done and all of those things. We're just kind of muddling through day to day with the people who give you a funny look in Tesco, and so it's a bit jarring sometimes, because you kind of think you're setting yourself up as this kind of I guess somebody that we should all be aspiring to be a bit more like if we're going through the same problems, but it's not always so accessible.
Exactly.
To kind of regular people.
And also, that's where I think the comparisonitis can come in, because it's like, oh my God, they've got their shit together and they're going through something similar to me. I don't have my shit together, for example, you know. And also, let's be honest, like alopecia people don't always lose all their hair either. So there are some people that are suffering that still have their hair, but maybe are either not talking about it or talking about it. You mentioned there about people looking at you differently and that sort of funny look. We talked a little bit off camera. I'd love to know, how differently do people treat you?
Very, very differently. Yeah, it's really interesting. So one of the things, as I mentioned to you before we started recording, is that I always get offered a seat on the tube. Now I'm bald. Do you know, I didn't get offered a seat on the tube when I was 8 months pregnant with twins, right? But bald, that does it. So I think that's kind of funny. And one of the things I really like is when like small kids stare, because I can smile back, and if they're like close to me, in front, next to me in the queue or whatever, I can sort of start a conversation. And it's funny how parents are always really apologetic and embarrassed, and it's nice that I can have that conversation. That's not to say there aren't so many stupid things that have been said to me. Hey, there's a man who served me in a shop who asked me what the prognosis was while he was taking my money, which is just horrific on so many levels. I mean, it's just so awful. And I think I don't mind if people kind of make a mistake about why I'm bald, and I'd much rather someone ask me a question. But like, what if he was right? What if I did have cancer and he was asking me what the prognosis was? And it's just, I came away from that thinking, I don't know what I should have said to him. I still don't know what I should have said. But so yeah, there's a lot of stupid stuff goes on. But on the whole, I really like how it opens up conversations.
Yeah. That's the important part though, right? And I mean, we're laughing about it. You know, this guy who's serving you, it's like, oh, do you want a take in or take away? PS, you know, what's the prognosis? It's like,
how long have you got to live?
It's people's lack of education, actually, really. And the bit that gets me about that is obviously, okay, at least you can have the conversation. But for me, I'm more about ask the question, don't make the assumption. Because, and if you feel that you want to ask the question, it's about whether they're open to that. But one thing that baffles me is the lack of understanding people have and the assumptions they make. And actually then, does that mean you're always going to have to deal with that everywhere you go? And I think that's the difference, obviously, without anything that a lot of people go through, it isn't visible. I mean, going back to my own experience, something, you know, which for me was very traumatic, was losing everything and being clinically depressed. No one could see it. So I felt like going down the street, people were like, why are you not at work? You know, and on some sides, which is so ironic, I'm talking to you now, Lizzie, I used to say to people, I just wish people could see something different. I wish I had a broken leg, or I wish I had cast, or wish I had crutches, so people could say, oh, there is a reason, you know. But actually, when you sit on the other side, it's like, you know, sometimes I'm sure there are other thoughts. And I guess with that, you mentioned wigs, because obviously that's a big decision women make. It's like, do I want a wig? Do I not? What was going through your mind, and how did you make that decision?
At first, it felt, I didn't even think there was any other option than get a wig and make it close to my own hair.
Wow.
That felt like that was just the obvious thing to do. Then once I kind of came out as bald, I realised that maybe I could start having some fun with wigs. So I got a little bit obsessed with buying hair. So I had a blonde curly one and a short red one and a rainbow one, like just a box full of wigs. And I'd have real fun and kind of get the wig out and taking pictures and sharing it on social media and talk about New Hair Day. My daughter said there was a girl in her class at school who was really baffled. How does your mum keep having like a different haircut every day? And she just couldn't work out how I was making my hair grow and shrink. So yeah, I had a lot of fun with wigs. But by the time I got to my first summer of being bald, I was just so uncomfortable and miserable and sweaty all the time. And I just made a decision one day, going around to a friend's house, that I think I'm going to leave the wig at home. And I was like, that was the next scary thing to do. But I didn't really look back from then. I haven't worn wigs now for, at least 5 years, I guess. So I've still got the box of wigs. It's quite fun to play dress up sometimes. But yeah, I'm really glad that I ditched them when I did.
Wow. And it must be such a big thing to do. Like you say, you know, coming out on social media and sharing it, then also it's big, different level being in person, you know, and other people seeing it and looking at you. And I think it's amazing to see how confident you are. You know, when I met you, first met in person, and it was just like, I actually noticed your voice first before I saw you, because it was just, you're such an inspiring person and how you hold yourself. And obviously you've gone on then to use a lot of this in what you're doing with helping people. Now, the bit I find fascinating is there's a big assumption in the coaching world that the coach goes through a life-changing experience, leaves their old identity behind, decides they want to be a coach, and then uses that to help people. What I find fascinating about yours is that wasn't your journey. You were coaching and you were doing your diploma and you just finished doing all of that as this was happening. Yeah. So what brought you into coaching to start off with? Because that's obviously a huge part of your life now.
Yeah, right. I had been a secondary school teacher for 8 years, and I had to leave teaching in 2012 when my first marriage broke down, and it had been a very difficult and abusive marriage, and my twins were 3 at the time, and my son had just been diagnosed as autistic, and I was trying to get to grips with what that meant for us. And I was quite ill because of not looking after myself during this marriage that I was in. And I'd been really struggling at work. I now know that I am neurodivergent, and having ADHD made it really, really hard to be an effective teacher. But at the time I didn't know, so I was just drowning under marking and paperwork and mistakes and coming home to this awful situation. And then finally ended my marriage, and actually I realised quite quickly that there was no way I could carry on working as a teacher. It was just too much, and it was making me ill, and I couldn't be there for the kids. And so I was incredibly lucky that I have parents who are not only willing to support me, but financially able to. So, I kind of talk about how I kind of quit teaching and became a single parent on benefits, but actually that does a disservice to people who really are struggling on benefits, because I was really lucky my parents could supplement that for me. And so we did that for a while, for a few years. It was really a case of just rebuilding me and the kids and getting ourselves back together. And then it got to a point where I knew I needed to start earning a living again, but I couldn't even contemplate the idea of going back to teaching. It had just kind of nearly broken me. And I also knew that really what I needed to do was be self-employed so that I could choose my hours around the kids and around my health. And it was my mum who suggested coaching. So she was very senior in her career. She was a professor and sort of very senior at London University. And so she'd worked with a coach herself quite a lot. And she said, I think you'd be good at coaching. I've got a coach who's helped me loads, and the things that I do with my coach, I could totally see you doing. And I didn't really know what it was. So went on off and had a read and thought, yeah, I can see how this works for me actually, because I think that one of the things that underpins kind of the way I approach life is that I kind of always look for the way forward and for the solution, which is what coaching is all about. And I thought that really works. I don't want to, because I kind of thought briefly about counselling and thought, no, coaching is a much better fit for me, because I want to say, right, this is what's happened, and we don't have to ignore what's happened. We can understand that and process it, but then we can think about where we're going next and moving forwards. So that was kind of how I came to coaching. And then I went to University of East London and did a postgraduate diploma, which was a 2-year programme. Because for me, it's always really important to do things properly and do things well. I didn't want to do a weekend course and call myself a coach. And so that was how that all started. But the programme I was on was actually learning to be a careers coach. And what I found was actually a lot of the people on the programme with me were kind of in HR and things like that. And it wasn't a world that interested me. And I kind of thought, I don't really think I'm on the right programme here actually, because I'm loving the coaching stuff, but the career stuff just isn't right for me. But I was doing it because I needed to start a business and earn a living. So I thought, oh no, what am I going to do? And funnily enough, it's kind of really the opposite of what I do now, because I was also just leading up to my wedding and doing what a lot of brides do, which was dieting. But in true Lizi style, I had to go like the whole hog and do one of these crazy soups and shakes diets, and lost a load of weight. I went from a size 22 to a size 12 in a year. And I was like, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to be a weight loss coach, and I'm going to help women to understand why they make the wrong choices around food, because I was really annoyed that everyone keeps telling women like what you should be eating. It's like, we know we shouldn't be eating so much chocolate and we should move more. That's not the issue. The issue is that despite knowing that, we still make the wrong choices. So we can have coaching to understand that. But of course, I had massive imposter syndrome because I didn't have the answer. I'd had soups and shakes for a year and I didn't actually understand my relationship with food. So that was kind of how my coaching career started. And then a few months in, I lost all my hair, was given steroids to try and stop the hair falling out, which made me put on weight. Then started comfort eating, which made me put on more weight. And then by 6 months after starting my business, I was a fat weight loss coach, a fat bald weight loss coach. So I had to rethink.
Wow. It's fascinating though, isn't it? How it all comes about. And, I'm a massive believer, as cliche as it sounds, that things are ready for us when we're ready, and everything does happen for a reason.
Agree.
And I think it's fascinating how where you started, even though you were very much in the careers coaching world, or you thought that's what and then you're like, actually, I don't really want that. It's almost like whatever you believe in, the universe, spirits gave you what you needed to then go, right, actually, I mean, now I'm sure many people come to you because they see your confidence. And one of the things I'm curious to know about you, Lizi, so when people are investing in coaching or in mentoring, they want to know someone and they want to work with someone and go, they've experienced what I've experienced, or if they can do it, I can do it. And most people have to justify that through conversations. Do you find, because of going bold and because of your confidence around that, it actually helps people to see, do you know what, if Lizi can do it, I can do it too?
I'd like to think so. I hope so, to a certain degree. I mean, I guess what's funny is that it has come full circle, because the coaching I do is very career based. I almost entirely work with kind of business owners and entrepreneurs about being more confident to show up in our businesses and kind of create the success that we're really capable of. And so I think that one of the there's loads of confidence challenges, as we know, when we're kind of doing all of those things. But one of the big ones is kind of fear around visibility. And so if they see kind of me showing up kind of imperfectly perfect and all those other cliches and saying, well, actually, I haven't even put any makeup on apart from draw my eyebrows this morning. So if I can do that and get on and do a live or go to a networking meeting and stand up and give a pitch, then I can show you how to have the confidence to do that as well. So I think that visibility piece is probably a really big one, but hopefully people can see me walking my talk and realise that actually, yeah, they can do that as well.
Yeah, definitely. And let's be honest, like, you don't just walk the talk with coaching sessions. The reason we met was because we're both quite well-known speakers, and you've gone on to do not one but 2 TEDx talks. Like, let's just let that sink in. So how did the TEDx come about, and what was it like for you standing on that red dot, you know, genuinely being the person you wanted to be, stood there, you know, all showing up exactly how you wanted to, no wig, nothing else, like just, this is Lizi, this is who I am?
Well, TEDx's are like buses. You apply for years and then 2 come along at once. So actually they weren't, one of them wasn't, I didn't end up doing, but I had applied for a number of TEDx's because I just, as a speaker, it's kind of, that's the pinnacle, right? That's the thing for a lot of speakers that you really want to be able to say that you've done. And so I'd applied quite a few times and I hadn't really got there. And then towards the end of 2019, within the space of 2 weeks, 2 of them came back to me and said, yes, we've selected you as a speaker. And then 2020 hit and obviously everything changed. And so we'd been kind of building up to these 2 events and suddenly we were in lockdown. One of them decided to pull it and to wait until such time we could kind of run it again. And one of them decided to move it to an online event. And so that meant my first TEDx experience was kind of bittersweet because, yes, I could call myself a TEDx speaker, but I'd done it from my living room talking to a laptop screen instead of standing on the red dot. And so it felt like, it was a bit sad, really. So I knew that actually I needed to go again. And so our lovely mutual friend, Danny Wallace, I'd been working with her and she'd told a few of us about an opportunity she'd seen to apply to speak at TEDx Northwich. So I took her advice because she always gives good advice and was offered that speaker slot, and it was an incredible experience. I mean, one thing I've learned is that not all TEDx's are created equal, and some are better and more professionally organised than others. And this was just such a great experience. I went through a whole speaker training program with them and came out as a much better speaker at the end as a result of the work that they put in with me. And walking onto that stage and standing on the red dot and having friends in the audience cheering for me, and then afterwards kind of having people come up to me and tell me the impact that hearing me speak had had on them, which is like, that's the big thing. Like, when you're a speaker, that's what you do it for, is the knowing that you've really touched someone in some way who's been in that audience. It was a really proud moment, and I really kind of, beyond just the sort of professional recognition of being able to say, hey, I'm Lizi Jackson Barrett, I'm a multiple TEDx speaker, actually, that's kind of just the surface stuff. What it meant for me was so much more than that. So it's something I'm really proud of.
Yeah, and I could totally understand why. Like, it's so inspiring. And I think I find it amazing, Lizi, because you've been on such a journey of your own confidence. And let's be honest, like, various different things you didn't expect have come up and actually probably challenged that and maybe shaken the foundations. But the fact that you can get on that stage and speak so openly, and I've watched that talk, and I think it's fantastic. And we'll make sure we put it in the notes as well if anybody else wants to have a watch. I'm curious for you, did the confidence stay the same when you were prepping that, or did any of the little voices come back in of, who are people, who is she and why is she standing there? Why is she bold? You know, did any of that come into your mind as you were getting ready or even on the stage?
No, not by that point. I think in the lead up it did a bit. Ironically, because I had done a TEDx before and was like at work as a professional speaker, and I was pretty much the only one from that cohort of speakers who I guess was a speaker. And so I know that some of the other speakers kind of had beyond, I don't say on a pedestal because that's probably saying kind of overstating it, but saw me maybe a slightly different or better and it meant that I felt like I had to show up as I'm here and I'm a speaker and I'm not going to make any mistakes. And actually I wanted the same kind of nurturing and support and hand-holding as everyone else. I mean, luckily they really were a fantastic bunch of people to speak with, which I was very fortunate to have. And it was a very supportive space. But there was a little period, I think at the beginning when we were getting to know each other, that I don't know if maybe it felt a bit intimidating for them to have someone who was already a TEDxer in the space. I don't know, but I wasn't expecting that to be the thing that knocked me a bit, because I felt like there was this extra pressure for me to be amazing.
Yeah, I can completely relate to that though, because we all put pressure on ourselves in different ways, right? And it can show up in different ways. And I completely relate. And one of the things that I struggle with is I'm a lifelong learner. I love studying. I love learning. I always want to be the most dumbest person in the room. I want to learn from everyone. And I always want to see if I can try and keep my mouth shut and listen. But one of the things that frustrates me is when other people who are the mentors or the coaches are like, oh, Lizzie, you don't need the help. You already got this. Or Chloe, oh, you're already doing really well. I'm like, no, I actually still want to learn. I still want to ask questions. I still want to, because I think it's the perception, isn't it, that people have us, Lizzie's got this, you know, and we're going, well, actually, what if I don't?
Yeah.
Or, you know, I always think if they already put you on a pedestal, my words, it's easier to come off. Yeah. You know, the higher the high, the bigger the fall.
Exactly that. And you only reach that pedestal because of all the listening to people and learning and being quiet and making mistakes. And so that part of it all is so important. And as soon as we stop doing that, that's when we kind of fall off the pedestal all by ourselves.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Oh, Lizzie, it's been so great talking to you. I feel like we could just chat forever. I mean, we are going to actually have coffee.
I think we should.
Off camera as well, and carry on what we had originally planned. So I've got a couple of questions for you, which we always have at the end of all of our interviews. And this is something recently that we've started doing. So I'm curious for you, on your journey, who has inspired you throughout your journey, whether it's mentors or celebrities or public figures? Like who's inspired you, or even family members on your journey?
I knew you were going to ask me this, so I have been giving it a lot of thought. And actually, it always comes down every time for me to my parents, for slightly different reasons. My mum kind of was brought up in a very working class family in the East End of London, and there wasn't a huge amount to go around, and she left school at 15 with no qualifications to her name, and she went on to be a professor and an international keynote speaker, and kind of really at the absolute top of her field in the area that she kind of specialises in. And I think she, for me, was a real lesson, and has always been a real lesson in you can. It kind of sounds a bit cliche. You can be anything you want to be, but actually you can kind of. Your roots or your resources, all of those things don't have to limit what you can achieve. And my dad, because he ran his own accountancy practice for kind of all of my life that I can remember, and he taught me a lot about entrepreneurship, but also for me probably the biggest thing that I find inspiring when I think back is that growing up, my dad was always home for dinner at 6 o'clock, and he drove us to school most mornings. And now, as a business owner myself, I recognise what a challenge that must have been. That I never remember sitting there with my brother and my mum having dinner being told, well, Dad's working late again tonight. And I don't quite know how we managed that, because he had a really successful business. So yeah, both of them, for two different reasons, have always been my inspiration.
Oh wow, I love that. I think it's really important as well, because a lot of people look for inspiration externally, you know, and I mean really externally, like social media, Google, YouTube. But actually, isn't it so incredible to look back? And I think it does happen when you get older. We look back at our own parents or our family members, go, how fortunate was I to have them in my life? So that's really beautiful. Thank you for sharing that here. Next question for you. If you were to write a book, which I believe you have already, but if you were to write another book, what would you write and why?
So my first book was, it was really about my body confidence journey and losing my hair and how other people kind of feel good about the way they look. And although I'm really glad that book's out there and I know it helps people, it doesn't fit so much now with where I am and what I'm doing and what I'm all about. So I do feel that there's like the next book is there and at some point I'll write it. And I think I really want to just delve more into all these kind of philosophies and beliefs that I've picked up through my own journey around what confidence actually is, the huge mistakes that get made when we try to help people be more confident, which incidentally is saying to them, you just need to be more confident. Like, it's the worst advice anyone can ever give. It's like, oh, right, I'll just be confident then. That might be the title. You just need to be more confident. So yeah, I think just putting all of this stuff into a book and just sharing what I've learned and how I think people can become confident is, it's a bit of a no-brainer for me, really. The book's waiting to be written.
Yeah, I love that idea. I love that. And I think it's important to share the advice and share the tips from someone that has lived and breathed it, obviously, and helped like loads of people through that. So I'm curious as well, the beautiful thing about books is they're able to help people. What book has inspired you or helped you on your journey?
I think this one, I really did have to think long and hard. Again, I knew you were going to ask me this question, and it didn't come easily, but then I realised what it is. And there's a couple of books that are kind of for the same reason. So I don't even know how many years ago now, but maybe 8 years ago, something like that. I read a book called Odd Girl Out by Laurie James, who is an autistic woman writing about her experience of being diagnosed with autism as an adult and discovering what that meant for her. And it was through reading that book that I realised I'm autistic. And much, much more recently, in kind of the last few months, I've also listened to a book on Audible by Wharmby called Untypical, which again is about his experience of being autistic, discovering he's autistic, kind of later in life, his career as a secondary school teacher, which obviously I really relate to. And the reason they've helped me so much is because my kind of neurodivergent diagnoses came as an adult in my 40s. And they've been such an important part of my confidence journey because they've helped me to understand the way I work and the way I tick and to be kind to myself about the things I find difficult. And so I think any book that just helps us to get an understanding of ourselves and think about, right, well, this is something that is just part of who I am. So what am I going to do with that knowledge? How am I going to be open about the support I need or the challenges I have? How can I really harness some of the good stuff that comes with that and what it means for me? So I think even though I was surprised when I realised they were the books I was going to say to you, it makes real sense to me that anything that just is somebody's story that helps you to go, oh, I think that might be me actually, that makes a real difference.
Yeah. I just absolutely love the power of books, you know. As a book publisher, I mean, I'm very fortunate to read a lot of books, to mentor a lot of people on writing books. We get pitched a lot of books that we don't publish, but the books that I think are the most powerful and are the most inspiring is where they've got the balance of inspiration of someone's story, but also information so that someone doesn't just feel inspired, but like, well, how do I apply that to me?
Yeah.
You know, it's really got to have a blend of both. And that's those books that you've described have, you know.
Yes,
it's really about helping people with our story and also with our lessons and our advice.
Yeah,
so yeah,
absolutely. Yeah.
Oh, Lizzie, last question, which we ask all our guests. Who do you know that has an inspiring story that you think we should have on the show next?
I would love to introduce you to my friend Catherine Popp, who runs a networking group, business networking across Essex. And she is who introduced me to the world of networking and how actually it could be this really supportive, nurturing, amazing environment where people lift each other up. And so she's hugely inspiring, partly because of the business that she runs, but actually because of the story that's gone before it. And she talks a lot about having gone through some very, very difficult marriages and health issues and all kinds of horrendous challenges she's had to find her way through. And I think she's just one of life's real fighters, and she has no idea how inspiring she is. So I think it would be incredible for her to be able to tell you her story and for you to hear about everything she's overcome.
Oh, thank you so much, Lizi. I would love to meet her. And I'm definitely going to be coming along to some of those networking events.
Yay.
That sounds great. Well, thank you so much, lovely, for being on the show. I feel like I could actually just talk to you forever about this sort of stuff and just sharing so openly. I'm sure there'll be people watching and listening who are either struggling with it right now or who have experienced it and can relate to what you shared. So thank you so much for being so open.
Thanks for having me.
Been great. Everyone watching, I hope you've enjoyed that as much as I have. How inspiring is Lizi's journey? You know, going from becoming a coach, not knowing what was happening in front of her and what was about to happen, to completely change everything she was doing in her life and the way she sees herself. I hope it has inspired you to really reflect on who you are and what it means to you for the way you look as well, and actually challenge yourself with the same questions that Lizi has challenged herself with. Now, if you haven't already and you're watching on our YouTube channel, do make sure you subscribe to the show and you leave a comment with what's been the biggest golden nugget, what's been the biggest thing you've taken away from Lizi's inspiring story. And if you're listening on any of our podcast platforms and on Spotify or Apple or anywhere else, then make sure you jump over to YouTube, leave a comment, or you can stick around on the audio platforms and make sure you subscribe so you don't miss our next inspiring guest. I'll see you next week.